People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, "Don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me."
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
Captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
Today on Saved on Camera. Terror in midair as a commuter piloting his own plane loses power.
When the engine lost power, I was also right in front of a large water body.
8,000 feet above the Canadian wilderness, the situation takes a nosedive.
You see the treetops getting closer and closer. At that point, that's when I heard a loud explosion.
Search and rescue have been mobilized, but it won't be that simple.
The terrain at the rescue scene was rough terrain.
And worse still, locating the crash site will not be easy.
I realized very quickly that I did not have my GPS on me. I knew I could be in the woods for days.
In the UK, a local animal lover was surprised to find that a dolphin washed up on their beach was still alive.
We've never had a live dolphin stranding. We needed to move him.
As more rescuers joined, they knew the clock was ticking, but moving the creature was looking unlikely.
It was a very large dolphin and very heavy, and for the two of us by ourselves to move that would have been impossible.
A woman on holiday in Bali takes a terrifying fall into a volcano during a nighttime hike.
I realised the height she'd fallen. There's no way she could have made that.
With no emergency services in sight, it's down to her fellow hikers to help as her life hangs in the balance.
It was scary, especially because she had hit her head. Time was definitely critical.
She was turning blue. I had nothing to actually treat her injuries. I was pretty certain that we were going to lose her.
In the UK, a young boy's pet dog has disappeared without a trace.
I was upset. He's more like a brother to me.
My dad rang me in floods of tears of we can't find the dog. My heart absolutely sank because he means so much to Josh.
2 days after he disappears, the young boy's sister received devastating news.
Well, someone reached out to us and said they'd seen a small black collie get knocked by a car.
And this will mean a race against time for a local search and rescue volunteer.
Quite often they try to find somewhere to go and hide and unfortunately never come out, and that would be the end. He was in desperate need to be found.
In Canada, the pilot of a light aircraft has noticed a problem during a morning flight.
I noticed my engine settings, they were slightly off. And these settings are never slightly off.
His engine was failing, leaving him in a mid-air emergency.
That's when I heard a loud explosion and saw a tree actually penetrate right through the bottom of the airplane.
Commuting to and from work can be dull, but for American Matthew Lettinen, it's something he relishes.
I fly a Cirrus SR-22. It's an American-made aircraft, single engine.
3562 for 9 number Sarah, good day.
So that morning I was excited to fly because it's a very rough, remote, but beautiful part of the world.
Matt was getting ready to commute from the mine he owns in Canada to his family home in America.
When I arrived to the airport that morning, there's a standard procedure for a pre-flight check. Check the fuel sumps, check the oil level to make sure there's nothing that stands out as being irregular on the aircraft. The checks were acceptable, given the weather conditions were lovely, beautiful. Everything was checked off, ready to depart. Departure that morning from the Wabash Airport was standard. I was climbing up to 8,000 feet. I've flown up to the mine site probably 6 times, but I was very excited to fly out that morning to see the scenery, to see our mine from the air. I had about 20 minutes of time after takeoff to climb up to cruise altitude and to communicate with air traffic control.
3,000 under, sir.
And then I was in cruise flight, very smooth flight. After about 20 minutes, I noticed my engine settings, they were slightly off. And these settings were settings that are never slightly off. I knew something was very wrong.
The aircraft was unresponsive, and Matt knew he was in danger.
Okay, welcome aboard, guys.
My heart immediately started pounding through my chest. I could feel a flood of adrenaline. The first thing I did was radio the air traffic control, let them know I had something wrong with my engine. I'm trying to fly the airplane with my left hand. I'm trying to put the GPS in my pockets in my right hand, and also talking to air traffic control at the same time.
But we are ready to pick up the ATIS to Toronto.
I started checking which airport would be the closest one to fly to. I was in the middle of nowhere, and the nearest airport was still 25 minutes away from my current position at that time.
But Matt wouldn't make it there.
All of a sudden, I could immediately feel that the power was gone. The airplane was starting to slow down. At that point, I knew the engine was done.
His aircraft was in real trouble.
When the engine lost power, that was another huge shot of adrenaline. I don't recall very clearly the communication I was having with air traffic control. I remember trying to relay to them my GPS position.
As fear set in, Matt must act quickly.
I was right in front of a large water body. I did not want to crash into the water. And I remember looking down, trying to find, as flat an area as I could to set the airplane up over to pull the parachute.
Even though the plane's safety parachute had been deployed, he was still in trouble.
You see the treetops getting closer and closer. I just remember looking straight ahead, seeing the tips of the trees start to come underneath me. And at that point, that's when I heard a loud explosion. I saw a tree actually penetrate right through the bottom of the airplane. A moment later, I was on the ground.
Having survived the crash, Matt was about to begin another fight for survival.
The first thought I had once I hit the ground was get out, get away from the airplane in case there's an explosion.
I just had to pull the cap's parachute. I'm in the middle of Quebec.
I could see that I was cut on my leg, but I felt fine. I'm breathing very heavily, I'm sweating, and I was just trying to calm down, to try to think, what do I got to do next here to survive? I was about 65 nautical miles from the nearest human being, so I knew that it was very important for me to establish communications with somebody. I knew that if I did not find my GPS device, that would likely and almost surely be fatal for me as well.
But his GPS was still in the plane, and it was dangerous to go back.
With the plane in the distance, I can see fuel leaking out the wings, so I'm gonna stay a safe distance away until I know all the fuel's leaked out.
It took me a while to work up the courage to go back to the plane.
The fuel is largely drained out.
The GPS was sitting on the seat.
He could now start a call for help.
I'm in the middle of Quebec, trying to get my SOS to work.
I had prepared ahead of time to get the proper email addresses of where I could send these messages. The first thing I did was enable the SOS. Quickly started messaging both NAV Canada and my father so that he could pass it along to everyone else that I was okay. I was not getting confirmation that they were going through.
With no acknowledgement of his messages, Matt decided to try and find a place where he could get a better signal.
It took me about an hour to hike up a hillside to find a clearing where I could actually successfully send and receive messages.
Later, the reality of his situation sinks in.
Help was on the way, but it was hours away.
In the UK, a dolphin stranded on a local beach was found to be still alive, prompting locals to launch a rescue mission.
We were constantly keeping that supply of water over its body, doing what we could, and knowing that time wasn't on our side.
In the UK, Shoreham Beach in West Sussex is popular with locals and visitors. It's also home to a variety of marine wildlife, something members of the local community are passionate about, including Joe Snow.
For me, the main reason to volunteer was because I'm a diver and I'm an open water swimmer, and I love all things associated with the sea.
And her skills as a marine medic were needed when a dolphin was discovered stranded on a local beach. Without knowing its condition, Joe headed to investigate.
There were some superficial injuries. He'd moved around on the pebbles and got some grazes on his tail fluke.
Injured but still alive, Joe knew every second counted to get this creature back to the sea. But she also knew she would need help and called on fellow animal lover Pete Foggan.
I got down to the beach, and as I got here, the head office called just to say that I'd ideally like a vet on site as well to come and check to see if Dolphin was ready for refloating or any injuries.
In the meantime, the pair needed to protect the creature.
We tried to stop him getting further damage by putting some blankets underneath him. It was also quite important to keep him cool.
Beach Patrol Officer Robert Dove had also received a call from the Shoreham lifeguard.
Bravo, this is Worthing Base. I got the call midday that there was a beach mammal. OK, won't be long. I prepped for that, got the towing gear out, expecting the worst, and extra towels for hydration and saturation of the mammal.
By now, a local vet had arrived and was assessing the dolphin's condition.
The vet checked the vitals, all seemed good. The size and the weight of the animal was healthy. There wasn't any damage as to why it beached up. There wasn't any injuries, any netting damage on the body. So it was a green light to try a re-release.
They would need to move the dolphin to a calmer area, half a mile away at Shoreham Harbour. But moving this creature was not going to be easy.
It was a very large dolphin and very heavy, and for the two of us by ourselves to move that would have been impossible.
It was a very windy day, so there were quite a few kite surfers around.
Local resident and keen kite surfer David Donald was one of them.
It was a sunny day and I was with some mates. We were asked to come and assist the beach dolphin. I've never seen one on the beach before, so it was pretty unusual. Originally, they wanted to carry the dolphin to the harbour, which is a few hundred metres. So I don't think it would have been that easy to move it, because it's probably 150, 200 kilos.
There's a lot of weight there. We did have a large rug with a lot of muscle around it, but that was still a challenging ask.
But David had a moment of inspiration that might just work.
As part of my event business, I've got a big mat, so I suggested it. They said, yeah, so let's give it a try. So the guy from the Beach Patrol, who was there on his quad bike, he gave me a lift back to the house to grab the mat.
Later, with the dolphin having been stranded for 2 hours already, will David's plan to get it back to the water be in time? In the UK, a young boy is left devastated when his best friend goes missing.
Me and Dad decided to go out searching for him. We kept looking around, but we couldn't find him.
The boy's sister has heard that the dog has been hit by a car.
It was absolutely devastating. Just the thought that he was hurt somewhere and we couldn't really get to him.
And concerns for his welfare were mounting.
Quite often they try to find somewhere to go and hide and sit it out, and unfortunately never come out, and that would be the end.
Dogs are a man's best friend, but for one young man in Wales, his dog Socks means so much more.
Socks has changed my life a lot. He's more like a brother to me. He always runs around. He's sometimes a bit of a lunatic, and he's so fun.
Socks was brought into the family to help Josh at a tricky time in his life.
Josh relocated down to South Wales to live with us when his mum got ill. It's quite stressful starting in a new school, new friendship groups, new area.
It was quite difficult because I didn't know a single person. Socks have made life a lot easier because it's just socialising with people and stuff and having things in common, and Socks is one of them.
And their instant kinship is something the whole family couldn't fail to notice.
I would definitely say Socks is Josh's best friend, and it's vice versa as well. Socks doesn't want to be with anyone else but Josh.
Sadly, though, this came to an abrupt end.
My dad rang me in floods of tears. We can't find the dog, I don't know what to do. My heart absolutely sank because he means so much to Josh.
I was quite upset, but then I thought maybe he would come back, find his way home.
We put a few posts on social media. Someone reached out to us and said they'd seen a small black collie get knocked by a car, which then just meant everyone's heart sunk.
This same witness also contacted specialist search and rescue volunteer Jamie Jewell.
I run Mad Dogs and Welshman Doggy Daycare in Swansea, and I'm also a volunteer pilot for Drone SAR for Lost Dogs. Drone SAR is a volunteer search and rescue group with both drone users and ground crew to go searching for lost dogs.
All the while, though, Josh and Hayley kept up their search.
Me and Dad decided to go out searching for him. We started calling his name and stuff, and we kept looking around, but we couldn't find him. It was quite a hard couple of days.
Josh really struggled, and he just wanted to be out looking every single day. Trying to keep him calm throughout the whole process was quite difficult.
But in the background, Jamie was getting ready to start a search. He knew time was against him.
It was 2 days after the incident had happened. My impression that the dog wouldn't have been eating or drinking in that time, and potentially with an injury that could be bleeding, he was in desperate need to be found. Quite often they try to find somewhere to go and hide and sit it out, and unfortunately never come out, and that would be the end. I was told the location. I knew what area I was going to search on that particular day.
And later, knowing how inaccessible a location would be, could Jamie's drone have the advantage? A woman on holiday in Bali takes a terrifying fall into a volcano during a nighttime hike.
I realised the height she'd fallen. There's no way she could have made that.
With no emergency services in sight, it's down to her fellow hikers to help as her life hangs in the balance.
It was scary, especially because she had hit her head. Time is definitely critical.
She was turning blue. I had nothing to actually treat her injuries. I was pretty certain that we were going to lose her.
John Conway works as a firefighter, and it's a job he's passionate about.
I've been a firefighter for about 8 years. Obviously, it's not day to day that you get to go out and save people's lives. Every day is different, and you do get to do good in the community. And no matter how cheesy that sounds, I think that's why everybody does it, really.
Dorina Agaci, originally from Romania, now lives and works in Dublin.
I work as a paediatric nurse in Crumlin Children's Hospital. I always liked helping people. I know it's very cliche, but it's true. I also really enjoy traveling.
As fate would have it, both John and Dorina booked a trip to Bali, all set for an adventure.
So I decided to go to Bali on holiday, but I also wanted to do something while I was there. So I volunteered with an organisation to do healthcare education with kids.
One of the main reasons I wanted to go to Bali was the famous Mount Batur volcano. I heard that the sunrise treks were actually phenomenal, so that was a big part of why I booked to go there. I was really excited to do it, although we were up at 1 o'clock in the morning.
It was busy. There were a few groups there. The guys did warn us that the terrain was quite bad. It was very slippery.
Once I got to the top, there wasn't actually a great deal to see because it was pitch black and we were all just sat there waiting to see the sunrise. And I heard a woman screaming just behind me, and that's when I realised that someone had fallen into the crater.
We just all heard a very loud scream. At that point, all the tour guides just left us and they went into the crater. And they said that someone had fallen in and that she's bleeding.
John was keen to help, but he faced problems he'd never come across before.
She was 40 metres down and I'm on my own. I've got no first aid kit. I've got literally nothing. It's just me stood there in a vest.
Regardless, John put his own life in danger and began the descent.
It was only as I was getting towards the base of the crater I realised the height she'd fallen. There's no way she could have made that. She probably fell 20, 30 metres and then she would have rolled to the position I found her in. It was quite apparent that just looking at the fall, she had spinal injuries.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
John was shocked to find not only had she survived the fall, but was still conscious, although her injuries were a real cause for concern.
The fact she was still talking was insane, really. She had quite severe trauma to her head. I believe she broke her back in 2 or 3 places, broken ribs. She had some open fractures to her legs as well.
Back in the group above, unbeknown to John, Nurse Dorina Agachi was anxiously awaiting news of the woman's condition.
To be honest, I assumed the worst because I thought if somebody did fall in, it was probably going to be a really bad outcome for them. I mentioned to them that I'm a nurse and if they could take me there. I kind of went into autopilot. I didn't even think about it. It was just natural to just go and help.
After a precarious climb down into the crater, Dorina finally reached the woman and was a welcome sight.
She introduced herself. She said she was a nurse. She said she could help, and I've never felt such relief.
She had a few injuries that we were very concerned about, especially because she had hit her head. She had a big cut on her forehead. It was scary. I felt like I could do more, but I didn't have anything to help her with.
Realising they were out of their depth, and with the woman's condition fast deteriorating, they asked the guides to call in the emergency services.
Our first instinct was to ask about a medical helicopter, and the guys were looking at us like, what are you talking about?
One of the main concerns for me was any of the injuries that I couldn't see, what was going on inside of her body, because everything that I'd done was pretty makeshift. And that's when I was thinking, we need to move her, we need to get her out.
Later,
get the dog out.
They need to get the woman to hospital through the difficult terrain.
Stop.
At points, we were holding her above our head. Yeah, it was quite challenging, really, just carrying a person, let alone ourselves down them slopes.
Flying over the Canadian wilderness, Matt Lettonen's light aircraft suffered engine failure.
You see the treetops getting closer and closer. That's when I heard a loud explosion. And a moment later, I was on the ground.
After a crash landing, Matt used his GPS to send out an SOS, only to find he wasn't getting a signal.
It took me about an hour to hike up a hillside to find a clearing where I could actually successfully send and receive messages.
Luckily, Matt's hike had been worthwhile. His call for help was heard by the search and rescue team led by Nicholas Brouard.
Our role as search and rescue teams is to respond to emergency in remote location where anybody else can't go.
But any rescue attempt would take time.
We were about 2.5 hours of flight from the rescue scene. So there's a lot of things involved when we show up for a mission like this. We do some checks on the aircraft, we check our equipment, and then we start the helicopter and we were ready to go airborne.
Back at the crash scene, Matt's hopes were raised when he saw a spotter plane overhead.
I was getting feedback that there was an airplane overhead and I could hear an airplane overhead. I was being told that they could not see me. So I returned back to my base camp, quickly started a fire. It made a lot of smoke.
Come on, boys, you just flew right over me. Come on, get me, boys.
I received a message about 15 minutes later that they had spotted the smoke.
Matt's relief was short-lived. This giant Hercules was first response, and the rescue helicopter was still a distance away.
Help was on the way, but it was hours away.
But the spotter plane had dropped a radio, giving Matt a direct link to the search and rescue team.
It was out of a scene of a movie where they fly over and all of a sudden you see this little parachute just floating down to earth, and with a large buzzing sound.
And drop the radio for me.
The most glorious moment was not just finding the radio, but as I walked up to the radio, I could hear the search and rescue tech calling out my name.
The helicopter was reaching the crash scene. A rescue attempt was now in sight.
Matt sent a precise location of his position with a GPS. Because of that, the radius was narrowed and we were able to locate him pretty fast. The forest was dense, but there was a parachute on a tree. We were able to see the parachute, the plane, and Matt from the aircraft.
Waiting below, Matt had started to believe that he might be finally out of the woods.
Once the helicopter arrived, that was yet another feeling of joy, of optimism that this thing is coming to an end.
When I went down on the cable, I was just 30 feet from the aircraft, so I was able to see Matt.
The helicopter was overhead, the wind was incredible. As I got pulled into the helicopter, I'm just feeling joy. I'm just feeling very grateful that I'm sitting in this helicopter. And I was just in awe of them.
On our way back from the plane crash, Matt was really grateful. He shakes our hand.
Had I not been rescued in that relatively short amount of time, 5 hours, certainly at some point I would have perished from dehydration.
I was surprised. I've been on another mission where the airplane looks less broke and the patient more injured, and I was really glad to see that he wasn't injured.
But Nicholas firmly believes that Matt's rescue was partly down to his own actions.
If Matt didn't have a GPS or any kind of mean for us to locate him, we could have been searching for him for days.
However, it's the rescuers in the sky that Matt feels he owes his life to.
All the people that assisted with my rescue from the Quebec forest that day are my heroes. I'm grateful for the service that they provide. I'm grateful for the risks that they take to spend their lives to save one life.
I'm always grateful to have the opportunity to have an impact on someone's life and make him able to come back to his family.
You'd think that going through such a traumatic event may have clipped Matt's wings.
I'm happy to say I went flying yesterday for the first time. A little mix of anxiety, a little mix of excitement, but my first flight back in the air went very well. Where I should be dead in the woods right now, and how do I make the best use of my life going forward, if nothing else to honor the gift and the sacrifice and in gratitude for all the rescuers that helped get me out of the woods.
In the UK, rescuers are astonished by the condition of a dolphin that's been left stranded on one of their beaches.
When I went there when the dolphin was very alive, I was a little bit shocked and surprised.
To keep the mammal alive, they must act fast.
You've got to make sure that they get into the water.
But to get the 400-pound creature to the water is not going to be an easy task.
He did have a large rug with a lot of muscle around it, but that was still a challenging ask.
By this time, the dolphin had been beached for 2 hours, and locals had offered their help in getting the creature moved.
I've got a big mat, which I use for moving hot tubs. It's called a spar sledge.
We put that plastic roll mat against the side of the dolphin, and then everyone together, working in sync, lifted and rolled the dolphin onto the mat.
We hooked the sledge up to the quad bike that he's got and went across the beach with it.
The journey must have taken 10 to 15 minutes, looking at close to a kilometre.
The dolphin was actually not stressed while we were moving it. I'm not sure if it had gotten tired from being beached so long, or if it perhaps just realised that we were trying to help.
The team continued to do what they could to keep this creature alive.
We were keeping the hydration levels up, so we were constantly keeping that supply of water over its body, hoping for the best, doing what we could, and knowing that time wasn't on our side.
But when they finally reached the harbour and released the dolphin into the water, the animal did not swim off as hoped.
It's a group of people holding the dolphin upright in the water, refloating it just to allow it to sort of get its orientation back.
We initially tried to release it, and we removed the blankets and it toppled over to one side.
To come this far and see the dolphin perish was unthinkable. But just when they'd lost hope, there was a breakthrough.
15 minutes later, it decided it had enough and it wanted to go, so we just dropped the blanket and it swam off.
I didn't hold too much hope, but to my amazement, it survived. It had done a few laps and then found its flippers, shall we say, and steadily made its way out the harbour.
This extraordinary rescue was only possible with the community coming together. The dolphin's survival was thanks to them.
I don't know if it would have survived if we hadn't had some people there with that specialist knowledge. It's not something that happens every day on shore and beach, that's for sure.
Doing a great job together, really. Everybody sort of pulled together as a team. It was good.
Yeah, adrenaline was flowing. It was good to have been part of something which had a success story at the end.
Totally elated. I had a real lump in my throat when he swam away.
Back in the UK, a young boy's pet dog has been missing for 2 days.
Kept waking up having bad nightmares.
Despite searching high and low, there have been no sightings of him.
We started calling his name and stuff. We kept looking around, but we couldn't find him.
But the young boy's sister learned that the dog had been hit by a car.
Just the thought that he was hurt somewhere and we couldn't really get to him.
Meaning the clock was ticking for the rescue mission.
Potentially with an injury that they'd never come out, and that would be the end.
Jamie was about to get a breakthrough in the search.
After looking through some hedgerows, I noticed something white.
Back home, Josh was trying to stay positive.
I kept going to school thinking that maybe Dad would call me and say, we found socks at last, and it was quite difficult, and I was just trying to get my head down in school, and it was just impossible.
Jamie was going to do the impossible, but it wasn't going to be easy.
I flew the drone in closer and realised then that it really did look like the dog that I was after. And so I dropped the drone lower and lower to get a positive identification, and once I realised it was the dog, I could see there was slight movement, so I knew he was alive still. Given that it was only my second or third actual search out for a dog, I got very, very excited, quite emotional to be honest as well.
Jamie's elation soon changed to fear.
The dog was closer to the road than what I was, so I didn't want to get any closer with the drone until I could form a barrier between me and the road. The most thing that was panicking me was if I tried to make my way through, was he going to bolt?
Locating socks was one thing, convincing the injured pet to come with him, another.
When I first actually got close to him, he showed interest, but there was obvious injury to his front leg. I offered my hand out. He was coming up to my hand for a sniff, and then I popped a lead on him, and he got straight up. He got straight up and was happy to come out as well, so probably as relieved as I was.
A successful rescue, but not knowing how bad his injury was, Jamie wasted no time in reuniting Socks with his owners.
I contacted the person who found me on Facebook to get the details of the owners, and then I made arrangements to drop the dog back.
By now, Josh was about to get the news he'd been so hoping for.
I was texting Dad, and then Dad said we found Socks. Dad didn't tell me straight away that he got hit by a car. It was quite upsetting, but at the same time I was kind of glad that, like, he was back home and I was really with my best friend.
Hayley rushed Socks to the vet. She wasn't sure how badly hurt he was.
And he had a series of x-rays and they found out he'd broken the main bones in his arm. They just said that he was really lucky that it wasn't worse, considering that a car had knocked him and he'd been out in the wilderness for a few days on his own.
But it's Josh who feels like the lucky one, and he has Jamie to thank for it.
I thought it was kind of cool that Jamie found him with a vagina.
It is a really nice feeling knowing that you've made a big difference in someone's life. For Josh in particular, this dog was his best buddy. Makes it all worthwhile.
Without Jamie, we wouldn't have been able to find Socks. I was so glad that we had the family back together again.
In Bali, a woman is badly injured at the bottom of a volcano.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
She'd been given treatment by two fellow holidaymakers, off-duty firefighter John from Birmingham and Nurse Darina on holiday from Dublin. But it's vital they get her to hospital if she's going to survive. But the first problem for John and Darina was to get her out of the crater, which was looking impossible.
Being in Bali and being in a volcano, there was no ambulance coming to help us. There was no paramedics. There was someone who brought a first aid kit, but the equipment they had was a piece of wood to use as a splint.
So me and John were like, we took a moment and kind of a deep breath and like, okay, this is the situation and we need to, do our best with this, yeah.
That's when a board got magically brought down. It was one of the biggest reliefs of the day, really. So we had a method to actually move her and get her out safely.
But with the severity of her injuries, it was crucial they make the long journey back down without causing further trauma.
Luckily, with my job, we train to actually move people, keep them in alignment and isolated, so that helped, and I literally had to talk guys through how to move her.
If she's going upwards, someone needs to have under here.
And get her onto a board as safely as possible.
But the difficult terrain meant they needed as many hands as possible to help.
There were a lot of people there and we needed all of them to carry her from the crater. That was the most difficult part.
I looked around and we found the shallowest point of the crater. We couldn't just carry her out, so we ended up linking arms, and there must have been probably 30 of us. We pretty much dragged each other out while keeping the girl as flat as possible.
They were all holding the stretcher kind of on their shoulder. Because the terrain was so bad, they had to be very careful when they were walking. So we kept telling everyone to go very slowly. Obviously, the communication wasn't great.
So we had to try and keep her as flat as possible, but obviously the incline was intense, really. At points, we were holding her above our head, and Yeah, it was quite challenging really, just carrying a person, let alone ourselves, down them slopes.
And the physical aspect of getting her out wasn't their only worry.
In front of the girl, we were both very calm and professional. To each other, we did say this can go in a very bad direction very quickly, so we were both, I suppose, aware of that.
As we were going up, I kind of dealt with the carrying and manoeuvring her while Darina was kind of assessing her airway, her breathing and circulation and making sure she was stable.
After a difficult hike to the base of the mountain, there was a glimmer of hope as an ambulance was waiting for them.
It took about 5 hours to get her up and down from the volcano. And then we were greeted with an ambulance.
I thought, okay, we've made it. She's in safe hands. And I wanted to do kind of a handover to the ambulance staff.
But their sense of hope was short-lived.
We realized that there was only a driver there. There was nothing in the ambulance. And I was expecting at least something, some medication to, you know, help her. There was nothing there. So I just looked at John and said, we have to go with her to the hospital. If we brought her this far, you know, something can happen on the journey.
And there were more challenges to face on the 2-hour drive to hospital.
Yeah, the journey in the ambulance to the hospital was pretty horrendous. We ran out of oxygen. The seats that I was on weren't bolted down, so I had to tie the girl down with my hoodie. She was in incredible pain. I recall me and Darina were holding her hand on the way and telling her that how brilliant she was doing.
After the epic trek and drive, they finally reached the safe haven of a hospital.
So when we got to the hospital, I was finally happy that she's safe. We just collapsed on the nearest chairs, and we were both starving and exhausted.
On returning home, they learned the woman had recovered from her accident, and her survival was in no small part due to John and Darina's help.
I actually get goosebumps really looking back on it, but as I landed in the UK, I actually got a message off her. Throughout the journey, I was saying, "Hi, my name's John, I'm a firefighter, I'm a brummie," and her first message to me was, "Hi John, firefighter from Birmingham." Naturally, I welled up. Just all the emotions of what we'd been through, and she actually said like we'd saved her life. It was like, wow, like it kind of hit home really what happened then.
I was actually happy that I was there that day because I felt like me and John were supposed to be there for a reason. All three of us, we went through an extraordinary experience with a very, I suppose, positive ending.